Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. You are on the sidelines with the sideline guys for another NFL edition of the show. And today I have the honor of being joined by one of my brothers in arms, right? Someone that I look for when it comes to a lot of different aspects of my fandoms, right? It isn't just about sports, but today we're going deep into the NFL side of things with my guy Cole making his debut on the OTS channel. So to Cole, just want to say thank you for coming on. I'm excited to pick your brain and learn a lot more about your fandoms, what you're into, and obviously your thoughts on this 2025 draft class. So right off the top, Cole, why don't you let the people know where they could find you and everything you got going on?
Keep it short, sweet, and simple. Instagram and Twitter, we got the real J. Cole with a few underscores in between. And that's it. Keep it simple.
This guy's smooth as butter. You heard him. Make sure you follow him, the real J. Cole. And you could catch me at Negron MMA on Twitter as well as TikTok. And you could also catch me at Chris Negron underscore on Instagram. So as I mentioned to you earlier, right, we're going to be talking all things 2025 NFL draft throughout the show. So I'm excited to break down a lot of the different skill positions on offense, set the stage for our next episode where we really dig into the trenches, right? Because I figured we could go all defense too, but why don't we make it a defense plus the trenches episode two? So I'm looking forward to that one as well. We got multiple part series of 2025 NFL draft previews for you guys. So lock in. Make sure you're following the brand at OTS Media Co. on all social media platforms, OTS Media on YouTube, so you never miss all of the dope content we got coming to you. But with all the pleasantries out the way, Cole, I'm excited to learn what was your first love when it comes to sports, right? For me, just to give you a brief heads up, because I know I've said it on the show a couple times, but I got to let my guy Cole know, right? The first sport I've ever fell in love with was baseball. I grew up really close to Yankee Stadium. My family, all diehard Yankee fans. So that was the first sport that I learned of, right? Learned how the sport works, right? But then also fell in love with in that way. So why don't you let the people know where did it all start for you, and now what are your biggest fandoms when it comes to sports?
Oh, I could just say the same exact thing, except I'm about, I don't know, about an hour away from, it used to be Turner Field for the Braves. And baseball, grew up playing that as a kid, and then got into the greatest sport, in my opinion, of football. Um, before I got into high school, and then I stopped playing baseball, but continued to watch. And football grew from just loving the sport and playing the sport at high school to getting to be a part of the sport at the college level and experience the college game day, not only as a fan in the stands, but also getting to control the jumbotron um, at Georgia Southern. And then it grew from there. And I've coached high school in the state of Georgia at the highest classification for multiple years.
This guy's a vet, right? I love that. I didn't even know that, so that's super cool to learn about. So you're a Georgia baseball fan, Atlanta Braves fan, right? Are you
Yes.
what's your NFL team?
So NFL, that's funny you would ask. So I might be one of the oddball people about this because my dad growing up, you'll find out my college love and my NFL love came from him, and he grew up a Steel Curtain fan, like the prime part of the Steelers then. So I don't know if you would say any bandwagon maybe then for him, but not for myself. I still love the Atlanta Falcons. I just don't associate with some of their draft decisions each year. But the Steelers is probably where like my heart would be if I had to pick a team. But I'm definitely your fantasy guy that just knows every player on every basis in the league.
That's dope, man. I love that. And I feel like once you catch the bug, right, it's easy to sort of let that spread. I feel like now I'm still a fan of the MLB, but I'm more so a fan in the way I consider like a casual fan, right? Like I follow my team and I watch those games, but I'm not necessarily in on the league as I am with the NBA and the NFL, and of course MMA. We could go hours on all the specifics on that front. So, you mentioned your expertise in all these different ways as far as your experience, but also your coaching experience. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to be in that position, right? To be a leader of men and put those guys out there in the best position to go out there and win. Is that something that you take pride in, right? Is that something that is easy to do? I'm curious to hear from your perspective.
Well, it's definitely not easy. I would say that that was the big learning curve when I first started coaching because my brain was already set to uh, be a part of the analytics side of the game, where people want to watch on the couch and try to coach the game, and it's a lot easier said than done, and not knowing what comes into a game plan, um, and then telling those guys what your game plan is as a team for those boys, and then let them know that they're growing up into be young men, and the goal is, nobody likes to lose, but at the same time, the goal mainly for coaching at that level is to get them to grow up to be like great fathers, great husbands, things like that. But definitely want to show the side of like little bits of like what it gets for like individual drills to what it takes with what's going on through these in a game day. Some people have no idea the chaos that ensues through each channel that goes in on a headset. And then at a high school level, I definitely can't imagine on a college level.
I love that, man. Yeah, it's exciting to learn that about you, right? Because I had no idea. Our friendship goes deep in a lot of different ways in the gaming side of things, right? Our love for Pokemon and Draft League in that way. But this is an NFL draft show, ladies and gentlemen. So it's only right we kick it off the way I see fit. And at this one, I'm actually a little more interested on what I got to say. Right, for the rest of these, I'm more excited to hear about what you got to say, but we're starting off with our top 5 players in the draft, regardless of position. The way I looked at this one, I try to break it down, me being as honest with myself as possible as far as where these guys fit in the stack of their position in the NFL, right? What kind of contributor they can be on that next level? How are their prospects when it comes to looking towards where they stack up at their own position versus where these positions of needs might be, right? A lot of the times the number one talent on the board is not the name that's going to come off number one, just because of all the different factors when it comes to building a team, especially in 2025. When, let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, we got ourselves a quarterback problem, right? There isn't a lot of top tier quarterbacks, and the league is in some ways changing because of it. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, especially with that discussion. But I'm going to kick us off with our number one, right? Who I thought was the number one player, regardless of any other consideration. And this might be a hot take for a lot of people, right? This might be me being you could argue being buying into the hype, right? But I got my number one player on this big board, regardless of position, as Travis Hunter, ladies and gentlemen. And my reasons for that, listen, I think what he's going to be asked to do, if he's going to continue on the same trajectory as he did in college, as far as the way he splits his different snaps, um, that's a insurmountable task to ask anybody to do on one side of the ball in the NFL, right? To be that level of a starter, that is that consistent, especially coming out of college. Not a lot of guys are playing those amount of snaps on one side of the ball, let alone on both sides of the ball. So I think the biggest conversation with Travis Hunter here is potential and where the team is going to allow him to grow the most, right? Are they going to put him in a good position offensively, in addition to letting him do his thing on defense? Or are they looking to get a cornerback in the draft, right? I think you could really argue that he is a solid prospect for either position, right? And that's why I'm very confident in saying he's my number one player regardless, because I think he can have success on offense and on defense at the same time, let alone individually if he were to do only those singular things, right? And I think honestly, if I'm his agent, right, if I'm in his ear, I'm like, I don't know, Travis. You saw what Jamar Chase just made, right? Like, I think you might want to lock in on that side of the ball, because I think his offensive ceiling is with those guys like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. He has that kind of wiggle to his game and has big contact catchability. So on both sides of the ball, I marvel at this guy's talent, but I think the scariest part is, regardless of everything I said about his offense, I could see a world where, especially in the NFL, maybe the first couple years, he's really more so focused on being a lockdown corner in the NFL. And I think he's a top 5 prospect if that's all you're getting him for, as that as well. So give me Travis Hunter as my number 1 player, regardless of position.
Well, I s- I don't know if I'd call it a hot take. I definitely have seen from some obviously research. I mean, obviously he's the Heisman winner. I have a hot take on that too. We'll get to it in a second. But my number one best player overall, no matter what the position is between Travis Hunter and this guy, in my opinion. And I think it is Abdul Carter for Penn State. The main thing for him is hit stats might not throw off the wall for his last season with 12 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. People do forget that the key thing about him is he's got the full package. He's got the speed, he's got the strength. A lot of NFL comparisons have him to someone who went to the same college as him and Mike, or wearing the same jersey, Micah Parsons. So they have a lot in common, and you don't want to make comparisons too early, especially with a guy at that caliber of him. I like to make comparisons with maybe some older guys to throw it back and show our age a little bit. But the main thing is you can't go without chipping him from the guards. Tackles have got to have help at least some way. Tight ends don't even give enough help in chipping. And the other thing is that he's versatile enough that in the NFL, very common thing with some of your athletic edge rushers is the zone blitz, and he's got enough pass deflections to prove that from the college level.
It's a great shout, right? Him making that move to edge. I think he has a different, varied skill set than most guys that you look at as a traditional edge, right? There's some edge prospects that have come later on in this draft, too, that you could argue are super impressive, right? In what they're able to do, but they're not nowhere near as versatile as Abdul Carter is. I love that we went 1-2 in this direction because I don't want to speak for your number 2, but this is my number 2, right? So we could open this conversation up and keep going straight through just because I got him right up there as well. And I think if you're looking at the way NFL teams are incentivized today, I would argue he should be the consensus number 1 overall pick, in my opinion, just because what teams are looking for as far as anchoring the defense and giving themselves that name, so to speak, on that side of the ball. I think you could argue that's the most expensive position. And when it comes to drafting, historically, right, these are the guys that come off the board this early. These are the game wrecking players that think that they can make that big of a change, that they're worth those kind of picks. So um, I think especially him dealing with that injury late into this process certainly changes the way some people look at him. But I agree with you 100%. I think he should be looked at as one of those guys as far as who should be considered for the number 1 pick.
Well, and if you've got him at 2, we'll just piggyback off of each other. My number 2 is Travis Hunter. It's just you can't uh, count out somebody that plays like a unicorn in the game. The only examples you could ever have of that is Charles Woodson, Champ Bailey, and obviously Dion himself. So, but if I want to make comparisons to both sides of the ball for him, I would say currently players, I would have Devontae Smith. Garrett Wilson is how he plays on the offensive side of the ball, and on the defensive side of the ball, it reminds me more of like Pat Pete, Trayvon Diggs. I got one more person who I got. Oh, Darius Slay. So, I mean, he shows that, like you're saying, talking about contract wise, my heart's always with defensive players because offense can win you games, but defense wins championships. But at the same time, for a long run in production for him, the way the game is turned into a safety measure, the offensive side of the ball would definitely be more uh, proactive for him to get more money, a longevity in his career, things like that. But I mean, you can't have a conversation about the best 5 players in this draft and not include him at least somewhere.
That's a great shout. I love that. I love that we got the same one and two because number three really matters now. And I'm excited to lead that discussion because when it comes to this Heisman Trophy and who else is possibly deserving, my guy Ashton Genty is my number third top five player, regardless of position. I think what makes this such a tough position for me, and honestly, this might be the guy I could imagine maybe not even in your top five, but um, when I look at the kind of talent he is, you could argue he's probably the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley, right? And we've seen this year that with the proper kind of line in front of him, he could still turn in an insane record breaking type season. I think Ashton Genty is that kind of player. I think he is when you talk about Travis Hunter being a unicorn. I think he's a unicorn as well in the way that this past year he was asked to be very much so that bell cow back, and he thrived in that role, right? Was able to do that for all three downs and punching dudes in the mouth, right? Running straight at them and also maintaining great contact balance through a lot of different tackles, and then showing that breakaway speed too, right? It's not just about being able to get gritty and grimy. He could also find that gap and go all the way for you. So I'm a big fan of his prospects in the NFL. I think he's a game changer. And I think when it comes to, I don't know if you're familiar with the dynasty fantasy sports scene, right? And what that means for the fans that don't know. I know I always talk about it on this show, but it's the concept of a fantasy league in which all the players you draft are yours until they retire, right? Or until you cut them for your from your team. When you look at the 2025 class, I think Ashton Genty should be number one overall, no matter what. If you're picking the who you think the best player is, pick Ashton Genty, and that's a crazy take because usually you put a lot more value on the wide receivers because how long their game tends to be more longevity. But I think he's that kind of talent that he brings that kind of upside, and that's why we're talking about him potentially being a top 10 pick in the NFL. I think you hear that, right? You got him as the number third best player, but he's going to be a top 10 pick. That doesn't really make sense. Well, it speaks to the way they value this position, which I think is stupid because, especially in today's NFL, you could argue the teams with the best running backs are allowed to thrive a lot better, even if their quarterback isn't necessarily lights out on his own, right? If you have that 1-2 tandem now, you have a different wrinkle than most teams in the league have that option for. So my number three best player off the board, give me Ashton Genty, the guy who you could argue should have been the Heisman winner with his historic record-breaking season.
Well, just picking right back where you leaving off, because my hot take obviously is what you're saying is I think that Ashton Genty deserved, and I mean we use that term in college football a lot, is who uh, deserved and who's the best regarding the playoffs and all of the controversy that goes along with that. But the same thing when it comes to these awards, it's just it was a unicorn year for both of them in the sense that you kind of wish you had two Heisman trophies to give out, but unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So, without further ado, my number three is as well Ashton Genty. I cannot leave him out of the top five. I've got multiple things to talk about Ashton Genty. People want to down on the fact that he's 5'8.5". I don't see that being an issue because he weighs I think he weighed in at about 211 at the combine, which he cut just a little bit of weight, but it doesn't really phase him. You see how lean and cut he is. And I mean, in the backfield stance, I don't know if they're going to pick on him for that in the league, but really it doesn't matter. If the man can run the ball, the man can run the ball. Um, what people don't really talk about with him being the bell cow this last year is people don't look at what he did last season. The season prior in 23, he had, I think, 1,300. He had half the amount of rushing, but he had over 560 yards of receiving. So he can catch the ball more than it showed in this last season because I think he only had like 130 something yards. Um, but I talking about what he can do on film and what he does live on television. How about watching it live in person? Talking about my Georgia Southern boys. Well, he played them in week one and he ran for 260 yards and 6 tutties. Watching that live, and we still came close to winning. It was just like 54-43. I think somewhere around there was what the score was. It was just offensive shootout like crazy. Let's see, what do I have? I also got letting you know that he just puts you at an advantage where you're already 11 versus 10. He is going to make a man miss, or at least he is going to break that first contact because the second most leading rusher in last season was not another running back. It was his yards after contact. If that doesn't say anything, I don't know what else does. So Ashton Genty, controversy on like the way they pick the running backs in the league. Now this running back class is deeper than people want to give it credit. There are going to be steals in the 5th round, in the 6th round, and later. Uh, but the main thing is that, like, you give examples for like these elite teams. Derrick Henry going to a new team, seeing what he does. Saquon Barkley going to a new team, seeing what he does. And then you still have teams like the Bills with James Cook and that offensive line that he has, and the Lions with Gibbs. It just proven a point that, and not only you have the guy in the backfield, but you also have the guys blocking as well. And we'll get to those trenches whenever things get nice and cozy.
Yep, because I was going to say that's a big part, you could argue, of this draft class as a whole. I think a lot of the best players in the top 50 are linemen on both sides of the ball. And that brings me to my number four, best player overall. I love that we got a lot of consensus here. I said it was my last pick. I thought it might be different than yours, but God damn it, I'm almost positive this one is going to be different than yours. I'm going with the defensive tackle. Mason Graham out of Mizzou. I think this is a very hot take, but I think just the kind of game breaking skills he has, you see he raised the level of that defense in a lot of ways single handedly, right? With the kind of freak plays that he was able to make, really the gel, the glue that kept that defense together, in my opinion. And I think at the next level, he doesn't have the size that usually stands out at this position. So he might be looked at as someone that doesn't have that kind of upside because he's not that freak when it comes to his length for the position. But I think he's shown even against longer, rangier linemen. He's a game wrecker out there, right? And he's going to make plays no matter what. And he's also has a little bit of that ability to move a little bit around in that backfield as well. So there's a lot of different options for him as a defensive player. I'm excited to see how he transitions to the league. That's my number four best player. Who do you got? Cole.
At number 4, I have, since Travis Hunter wants to play both ways, I want to establish him potentially as just corner, but as receiver. I think the best raw receiver in the draft at from Arizona. I want to say his name right, but it's old boy T Mac,
Yes, sir.
Tatero McMillan. But comparisons for him, immediately, you don't usually give a comparison to a receiver before they get drafted and say the name Megatron. But they've got Megatron, they've got AJ Green, and they've got Julio Jones. And the way that uh, people that looked at this past season when he played against Travis Hunter on the defensive side of the ball, Travis Hunter lined up against him a lot of the times. It looked like it was clamped up. If you really watch film and you watch the game, he got held a lot, wasn't called. And a lot of times I think there was like 8 or 9 sacks by Colorado's defense that really doesn't exist because Arizona's offensive line at that time was just like paper thin. So a lot of times he got open and created the space, but there was the quarterback was escaping in the pocket, everything like that. But the last season is when he popped off against Travis Hunter himself, had the one-handed catch that went viral because obviously it was on Travis Hunter. And my thing is he's got the size, he's got the speed, and I guess this is just the consensus. If we want to talk about these top 5 players in our own opinion, is they almost like have the whole overall package of what you want at that position, and it's like that and some. It's like you have the measurables too, because like you might have a guy who's not disciplined as much, or he might be a little faulty in his footwork, but sometimes you just can't beat size, and being 6'4", almost 6'5" at receiver with about what 220 pounds on, that's saying something. And you can't teach size, and you can't teach that kind of talent that he already has before he gets into the league. So that is my number 4. It is the best raw receiver in T Mac McMillan from Arizona.
Let's go because you took my number five, right? You made it easy for me. I love that. Well, I'm interested. I'll let you make your fifth pick before I speak too much, but I love that on my side of the ball, right? There's no quarterbacks, right? Let's get those guys out of here. Because I think even though a lot of these guys are probably going to get picked after maybe one, maybe even two quarterbacks, you could argue that their talent and what they can do at the position is much higher. I think what's a little scary about T Mac for me is just his breakaway speed, right? A lot of the moments where he has these sensational contested catches, it's not because, oh, he didn't run a good route. It's just most of the time, a lot of these balls end up being 50-50 balls because he doesn't really have that kind of separation ability, despite being, like you said, a very smooth route runner. I think on tape, though, his stability is what I find to be the most well, how do I put this? The trait that really transfers over to the next level the best. I think having that stability at that size is very rare. So I like the comparisons you made with Megatron and those other larger receivers, but I think he also has if he had lands in the right situation, I think he has the upside to be more than just a go and grab it guy, right? I think he has a lot of smoothness in his game, and if he continues to work on that burst, there's a lot of different tools he can end his career up with. But I think T Mac is going to be great for no matter what team he ends up with. I see some mocks, they're putting him out of the top 20, right? They're putting him out real late, especially after the combine, which is crazy. I get it, right? We could get hyped on some of these other guys without tearing down the prospects of the others. I think, like you said, you can't teach size and strength, and I think he has it all. So I agree. T Mac is my number five. Cole, what's your number five? Take us home.
My number five may be coming to a shock. Nah, I'm just playing. It is also my boy Mason Graham. That's crazy. That's crazy. Did not even have any clue what we had in store. My main thing for bumping him down to five, I would have had him at three and had Genty go four and then McMillan at five. But the main thing for me is combine wise for him, he actually weighed in 32 pounds lighter. And so being an interior defensive lineman weighing under 300, he's at 296. Now he might put that weight back on. But him also being a 6'3", I mean, that's still good size. Obviously, we can't compare anyone to Aaron Donald because of just who Aaron Donald was, with the arm length and everything like that. But the weight loss to me was more concern than an excitement. Not crazy amount of length out of him. And like I said, the only oddball out of that is like doing comparisons with Aaron Donald, and he prove people wrong. Uh, it's just he's a dog at the interior line. No matter what, you're forced to double team him, and no matter what you do, you cannot run zone schemes against him because of that. He whipped up on Ohio State. Obviously, he's got some pretty good guys in that box along with him that will be going in this draft, and they whipped up on my boys as well in that bowl game. Um, but if you notice as well, you have no quarterback. I have no quarterback. And some might even say that none of these quarterbacks in this draft is potentially as good as the six from last season. That's what I've read on some. I don't know. That's a little bit of a hot take because, I mean, we haven't seen anything out of McCarthy yet. Drake May hasn't had enough snaps. We haven't seen enough out of Penix. But if you talk about the trend, all of these quarterbacks that are going into this draft all have one thing in common: the experience at the college level. And I don't know if that changes because of due to the NIL changing the landscape, where these young men are uh, not necessarily desperate, but they don't have the hunger to just go on ahead and get paid, get the NFL contract. I'm gonna play for 3 years. I'm gonna be a true junior or a redshirt sophomore, and I'm out. I know I'm a first round pick. Let me go. Instead, you've got guys doing potentially a Cooper Flag situation in the basketball side of things. Uh, I just let me do another year. Let me get this national championship. Let me try to shoot for this. I got this NIL deal. I'm okay. I don't need the money right now. I'll go into the league after I've got so many snaps. I think every quarterback in this draft has over 54 starts, something around that line.
I love that. I love that. I think, yeah, man, there's some interesting ones because you could argue that it's not top heavy, but you could also argue that there's some guys that could end up being starters down the line, right? Some guys we got to talk about that could be dark horses in that way. So it's only right we transition right to the quarterback space. And I'm going to give you the honors, right? I'm going to let you take the lead on this segment. I'm excited to hear your top five, and I'll chirp in as we go along with my numbers too. But when it comes to the quarterback position in this draft. Obviously, the consensus right now is Cam Ward. Shador is most people's number two, but I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about Cole. So why don't you let us know who's your number one QB prospect for 2025?
Well, I like to have things in a different manner, and I want to shake things up. And every type of thing when I was looking at film for the guys on these quarterbacks that I had in my list, that always kept going back to, not only have I saw Ashton Genty in person, I saw this guy play in person as well when he lost to Georgia Tech. I am taking Cam Ward as my number one quarterback off of this board.
I love it. So please dive in deep. This is also my number one quarterback of this class. Now, I got a hot take on this. I think, and we'll talk about this more because I'm excited to see why you have him ranked number one with all your knowledge. But for me, I think that my hot take in all this is I think he's going to be a much better fantasy quarterback than he will be NFL quarterback. I think when it comes to the raw like attributes, I think he's clearly the number one guy to go for. But my argument is for the number two guy, right? My argument is for Shador Sanders. I think that when it comes to the bare bones ability to play the position, right, and play it the right way, I think I like Shador's skills and his poise in those spots, despite how much I like Cam Ward. So Cole, off the top, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, right? I'm bringing other guys into this, but we're here to talk about Cam Ward first and foremost. He's both of our number ones. Why do you have him up that high?
The main thing for me for Cam Ward is the fact that if I'm going to start any of these quarterbacks right now, day one, going into this NFL season, I feel like he is the most ready if he had to be thrown into that position. And obviously, we know that we didn't have them as our top five of best athletes in this board because this quarterback class is not necessarily your Joe Burrows or any of those guys of that kind of caliber, but instead it's just team needs, and we'll know we'll get to that whenever we figure out what teams need what. And for me, Cam Ward just he already has the ability. Some people say that he's a little bit too much of a gunslinger, but some people forget that outside of the running ability, Josh Allen was a little bit too much of a gunslinger, and he just was a little errant with the ball. Cam Ward does sell the ball a little bit, but the main thing for him is that when it came to a lot of those clutch times where their defense was abysmal, along with Colorado's, but it was abysmal all season long, and he came up with it every time except for two situations where they just held the ball a little too long, and that's the main thing is that they'll work on that with him. He will be perfectly fine, at least regarding the other guys I have on this list. Now, you did say you have Shador as your number two. Here we go on the hot take. Now, I do know that when it comes to the way the draft is going to be done, Shador is going to either be somehow taken first before Cam or he will be taken after Cam. But I have Jackson Dart as my number two.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we got a couple different ways we got to go with this, okay? Because I got multiple things to say about everything we just laid out here. So before we move on, for Cam Ward, as someone who's been in these spots for not to speak to that level, but been in these spots, how do you feel about what happened in the bowl game and him leaving before, obviously before I give my thoughts, him leaving the game before it was finalized, and obviously they ended up losing that game. Do you think that translates at all to the NFL, or was that just a situation purely due to college versus pros?
It definitely was a different scenario than I've ever seen before. Normally, and well, I say normally, it's become the trend now, but since probably about a decade now, we've had guys sit out of bowl games. And I mean, Christian McCaffrey did it. A lot of top players end up doing it because they want to conserve their self, and I completely understand. I've always went by die for my ride for my team, die for my team. I've never understood the thought of uh, sitting out of a bowl game except for the benefit of yourself. But I completely understand in the sense of like your future. But at the same time, those are your brothers. Now, I know that on the inside, of being a fly on the wall at the college level, that a lot of your own teammates will be like, no, bro, you've got a future to look forward to. We'll do this thing for you. So the conversations happen more like that than people realize when you have those kind of guys that end up taking a seat. Now, in Cam's situation, to get to that milestone as a Miami quarterback in the record books for him to play that first half, that's more to me on Mario Cristobal as the head coach making that decision and letting him. Because obviously, if you're going to play one half, why not play the second half and have your team in a situation where you actually will probably and no doubt in my mind they win that game if he stays in. So for him to do that, and I don't know how much it goes into with teammates or the coach because we don't know super details. I definitely don't agree with it. You either sit out the whole thing or you play the whole thing. So that's even a more deeper level on it. So it might rub some NFL execs the wrong way, but as we both have him as our number one quarterback prospect, there's going to be somebody who needs a quarterback, and they're going to take him.
Great shouts all around. Now we move on to the most important thing. Your number two quarterback on the list, Jackson Dart. Talk to me about what makes him stand out above the rest of the guys in this class.
So the main thing for me for Jackson Dart is, and I know that people don't care enough about this in the caliber of outside of maybe you'd say the Philadelphia Eagles, the trend of looking at who you play at the college level. Jackson Dart played juggernaut after juggernaut after juggernaut. We know how that Georgia defense is. Now, that was a low scoring game, and he just did enough to be a game manager. But there's a lot of times where Jackson Dart just came off the wall. And the one thing that he did that impressed me the most is his composure. He had a lot of talent on that defensive side of the ball. Not to compare him to Patrick Mahomes in any sense, but the way the Chiefs were this last season, where you've got somebody of a talented quarterback caliber and maybe the offense has spurts, and it not necessarily happens to you because he had guys around him. My main thing is like the zip and his decision making at everything at a short to intermediate level in the pass game. Can he throw the deep ball? That's not necessarily his strong suit compared to Cam Ward and Shador Sanders, but he does so much of that RPO game because of Lane Kiffin that he reads at the first 20 yards level, probably at the best to me out of all the quarterbacks. And that goes a long way when, people like to make fun of Dak Prescott when he was in more of his prime, Tom Brady, where it's, oh, Dink and Dak, I'm just going to be check down Charlie. Hey, an open receiver is an open receiver. I'm going to win the game no matter what. And Jackson Dart does that the best out of the quarterbacks on this draft.
Man, I love that because here's my hot take, and I'll shut up after this one. I didn't even have it in my top five. God damn it! And I'm sure the consensus is riding with me on that one. But I love that you're speaking from your heart and you see those traits, like you said, that carry over. Right at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Seeing how these guys play in college, obviously, it's a good framework. But a lot of the times, once again, it's just that the development of you as a human, right? Once you're at that level and you hit the grown man age versus when you're literally becoming a young adult, there's a big difference in your athletic potential, and that's why you see such a big different trajectory, right? There's guys that pop off the screen in college that for other circumstances don't make it in that way, right? So it's all dependent on not just what you've done but what you're doing, right, to set yourself forward for the future. So I love that shout, being sticking to your guns, Cole. So I love it. I already gave you my number two. So what is your number three
Well,
best QB?
my number three is Mr. Shador Sanders. And that's the main thing when it comes to Shador and my on my board is the fact that he is probably the most cool, calm, collected. It's in his nature, and so because of it, the way he throws the ball always comes off as just smooth. It's silky. He probably has the best touch out of the quarterbacks. He might not necessarily make the best reads, but at the same time, he will throw a deep ball if he's got to. He knows Travis Hunter's down there. If you get him on a team that's got at least one caliber of receiver like that, he's going to be okay. As for me, I think that Jackson Dart can deliver the ball a little more dink and dunk to spread the ball around with his guys, and then Cam Ward is just Cam Ward himself. So Shador Sanders is number three for me. He's just Mr. Smooth, Mr. Silky, and he's going to be starting somewhere.
Yep, I love that shout. I think he is in some ways looked at as like the biggest star, right, of this QB class, and I find that a very interesting point too, right, because of who his pops is and who he's come up with. I think in no way he is undeserving of this spot because of his name. I think a lot of times players in this position, that's all that people could talk about, right? Like if his pops wasn't here, he wouldn't even be a top five or whatever pick. And I think that's just not the case. I think the talent is there. And like you said, what I like about him the most is his poise and his ability to, even when things are absolutely 10 times not in his favor, right? He's able to find a way to make certain things work, even if it doesn't actually turn out to the full win at the end of the day. He makes a lot out of nothing. And I think no matter what team drafts him, if they drafted him high, he's going to be asked to do that, right? So I think that's why I like him in that spot. Now we move on to my number three. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. As I mentioned, I got Jalen Milrow in this spot, and I think it's really based off of the top. Exactly, love them Bama boys. I think it's off the top tier athleticism, right? I think he has that potential to be somebody that is that big dual threat at the next level. Also shows accuracy, but I think when it comes to decision making, this is where I think things start to get a little shaky, right? I think this is if you could ask me in the same vein of a guy like Anthony Richardson, you I would much rather have an A Rich on the squad because guess what? He's younger, ladies and gentlemen, which is hard to bend your brain around, right? The COVID years has changed us. There's a lot of different things that a couple years ago we wouldn't see in a prospect at this level. But it sounds like I'm shitting on him. He's my number three guy. I like him. I think when it comes to his overall upside, though, I think his athletic talent is what leads the dance. Becoming a quarterback, so to speak, a strict quarterback is going to be what he needs the most growth towards. So I personally would like to see him in a position where he can grow into that starting spot like Pat Mahomes did. And I think he could actually be one of those guys that could become a star that I won't be surprised if he comes off the board early or mid second round in that vein. I don't think he's going to be too talked about right in this process, but I think teams are going to value what he brings to the table. So give me Jalen Miro number three. What's your number four, Cole?
Before I get to my number four, I just want to ask this. Are we wanting the media or we want my opinion? Because this whole situation here, you notice from my number two to then my number three is not what the media says. It's not what everybody else says. And as much as I love my boy Milrow and as proud of him as I am, and if there's anybody I watch the most film on, it is definitely him. He's not in my top five. Is he going
Wow.
to be one of the first five quarterbacks drafted? Yes, he is. But is he a top five to me? I want him to prove it wrong. He doesn't. He might not ever see this. It ain't no big deal to me. I want him to prove me wrong. I want him to do the Jalen Hurts narrative and get all this talk. You can't read a defense. You can't throw the ball. Obviously, Jalen Hurts made his transition to Oklahoma in his last year, but prove me wrong. I know you can do it. But right now, you were not the quarterback that you were versus the Bulldogs. That first half, nobody could beat that team. Everything changed after that. So, and his locker room, different things go along with all that. But his decision making when it comes to just pull the ball down and run. That's what you're best known for. Don't try to do these dink and dunk flats and out routes, and then you've thrown now 4 pick sixes in that last season. My number four is Kyle McCord, the leading passer in last season for college football. Obviously, he was at Ohio State, transferred to Syracuse. I would love for anybody to tell me any player from Syracuse that is in this draft.
We'll
I,
wait.
I for as much as I know, and I don't know everything for sure. I'm not trying to be a know-it-all, but I do know I think he's one of the only ones. It might be an offensive lineman or a safety somewhere in the late rounds. But Kyle McCord doing what he did with the talent that he had at Syracuse shows to me strides of where what he compared to all the quarterbacks that are going to be second, third, and later rounds. To me, that he is going to be that guy that is going to end up stealing a starting job from somebody in the league.
I love that. Someone that's definitely unheralded at the moment, despite, like you said, all the success he had at this level. I think I'm excited to see where he ends up because I think he's one of those guys that you could see falling similar to not obviously the player, but the situation, like a Jalen Hurts, right? He falls to a later round, ends up in a position where he gets to end up becoming that guy, and then you see, damn, we should have been up on this guy earlier. So that's a great shout. Someone that I don't even have in my top five. I'm going to be short and sweet. I got Will Howard here. I think he has once again when it comes to the traits, when it comes to the transferable skills from this level. I don't think he is an NFL quarterback at this moment. I think he isn't in that position just yet, but I think he has all the physical tools to grow into that as he continues to be molded in this league. I like obviously a lot of the splash plays we saw out of him in this last season. But when it comes to being consistent and making the right reads, I think that's where we have the biggest issue. I think he has a little bit of that early young Josh Allen in him, where he's willing to go. What is the proper term here? Horns to horns with a lot of guys when running the ball instead of just finding his way down and moving on to the next play. I think as a football player, you love to see that out of your guy, but it's also a dangerous double-edged sword, right? Because you don't want your quarterback getting hurt, especially on a play like that that is just unnecessary. So there's a lot of things I don't like about his decision making and process, but I think ultimately he has, when it comes to upside at the NFL level, I think he is the prototypical build of what you would want in an NFL style quarterback. So I think that dual threat, obviously the biggest and this is a lot of respect, right? The biggest evaluation I see in talent when they're talking about him, he has the potential to be somebody like a Josh Allen. I don't look at him as far as that. I think he did some of the bonehead similar decisions, right? But he doesn't have that, in my opinion, the same kind of arm talent. So there's a lot of things that need to be developed from Will Howard. But yeah, a lot of the talk on these 4 and 5 guys is probably just going to be me shitting on folks, as you hear. So that's all I got to say about Will. I think he's going to be a good player if given the right situation. But I think it speaks to how I'm feeling about this class that I'm on my 4th guy, and I'm already saying a lot more negative than positive. Cole, do you feel differently about your number 5 guy?
And my number 5 is different, but I had looked at Quinn Ewers. I had looked at Will Howard. I had looked at Dylan Gabriel and Riley Leonard. All those guys that had that experience at the playoff level. But none of those guys necessarily pop out. Necessarily, they're a little undersized. A few of them are decision making. But there's always some oddball that pops up in mock drafts every single year. And it hasn't popped up to a lot of people, but I do know that this is going to be a name that is going to shock some people, and he has had a little bit of an injury bug, but that is Tyler Shuff for Louisville. 6'5", right? He's the only quarterback in this class that has that size to him. He's 6'5". He showed a lot of poise. He actually ran really fast, and I think that the combine helped him out more than people realize, especially due to the injury that he had prior. So it definitely bumped him up. And to me, he is your prototypical quarterback with that big size. I mean, he's Josh Allen's height bit for the most part, but he runs a lot faster than you would have thought. If I remember correctly, I pull it up real fast. That he ran a 4.63 at his size. It definitely caught people's eyes, caught their attention, and he's going to be, in my opinion, a steal when he goes in these later drafts. And then he's my 5th best quarterback.
Also my 5th best quarterback, and like you said, huge big time riser when it came to the combine. And listen, this may be a hot take. That's a good speed for a wide receiver at that size. So when you consider all that, like you said, he has all the tools to make it work. Definitely going under the radar though. So if you're buying stock, now's the time. We gave you the gem. I got to ask you, Cole, is there anybody else honorable mentions you want to shout out? One of those late round guys, right? Like a Joe Milton for the Patriots that could be a potential NFL player down the line. Is there anyone else that sticks out to you?
I'd probably would go with the only other quarterback with that size, and it would probably be Riley Leonard from Notre Dame. Obviously, showing what he did with his team through the playoffs, getting all the way to the national championship. And then I did not write his name down, but I do know it's Indiana's quarterback. A lot of people are having him very underrated as a late round pick, and I do think that he's a good honorable mention as well.
Great shouts all around. Riley Leonard was the next guy up for me, so I'll leave it at that. It's only right that we move on to the next best option, the running backs, the guys that make the life easy for the quarterbacks. I'm really excited about this one. I think we all know where we're going with number 1, but Cole, why don't you lead the dance this time? You get the honor. Who you got in your number 1 overall running back, even though we already know?
We already know, and he is in my heart, my Heisman for 2024. It is the man, Ashton Genty.
Yes, sir. Ashton Genty's my number 1 overall too. Now I just got to ask you this. Some naysayers are saying, hey, he doesn't have the full package, right? But then guys like you and I that look back past just 1 year, right? A lot of people got the short-term memory when it comes to looking into these prospects. Do you think he is gonna lean into being that dual threat at this next level, or do you think it's gonna be more so like the Heisman year as far as his approach at running back at the NFL level?
I definitely would say it is less of a Derrick Henry of him being used in the league and more of a Saquon because people forget Saquon catches the ball very well as well.
Yes, sir. That's a great shout, and I agree with that. I think that's the part that people are sleeping on with this because he's got the lightning, but he's got the thunder as well, right? He has both of those big play abilities, which is what makes him such a big fantasy prospect, in my opinion. Is that he's going to be able to do it for you in both of those ways, which is really important when it comes to having that difference maker at that RB position. And you could argue in a league where when I grew up, right, there was a lot of different options when it came to fantasy running backs. Right now, you could argue my strategy, and I won championships last season in fantasy doing this, is going high on those RBs early and then filling out the wide receivers late because there's just so much more options when it comes to receivers than running backs in today's league. So, my hot take, how about this before we get into number two and number three? My hot take is I think there's about 6 or 7 guys in this draft that could potentially be NFL players, not just on the team, but getting quality minutes come the end of the season. I think it's that kind of a class. So speaks to the depth. Cole, who's your number two?
I'm looking at 10 to 11 running backs that have a potential of taking some spots in the league for this upcoming draft. And number 2 for me is Mr. Omarion Hampton from North Carolina. Had to basically carry the team on his back with the amount of rushing yards that he was able to provide from them this last season. And he shows, especially with his size, like he's got good size, a little bit over 6 foot, about 215. He's a guy that you just know that like when it comes to the thunder and the lightning, he doesn't flash it like Ashton Genty does, but he's going to get the job done.
Yes, sir. I love that. I love his prospects, and he's my number two as well, right? So now we're all locked in for running back. I think most people's top three are gonna be the same, but let's see if it is Cole. Who you got as your number three RB?
My number 3 is Iowa's very own Caleb Johnson.
Let's go. What about Caleb Johnson game do you like?
To me, Caleb Johnson, I just something about him just tells me he just wants to run somebody over every single time. And him and Omarion Hampton have very comparable sizes to one another. Uh, him being a part of a team with Iowa who used to notoriously be known for just only defensive players. Shout out to DeJean. The main thing is that the new offense coordinator came in, head coach decided to turn things around, and pretty good quarterback play. But him just being that cowbell when they needed him, and he's got pretty good hands as well.
I love that. I had him at my number four. So it's only right we circle back to my number three. Man, I'm excited about this guy. We got Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, right? Such a prestigious program, but I think he is among that same vein. I think he's a multiple tool running back, right? I think he's someone that could get it done in a lot of different phases at the NFL level. And I think this is why I'm so excited for this draft as a dynasty football fan because I'm in a couple different dynasty leagues and I got some of these middle round picks, right? The round two early picks. And man, these guys I think are going to be difference makers in this draft, regardless of the fact that they're going to end up coming off probably in the 60s, 70s in the actual draft board. But the level of play that these guys are going to bring, in my opinion, is big time. I think after, for me at least, right, when I'm looking at my top three, I think after Travion Henderson, I think there's a gap between him and Caleb Johnson as far as the upside. But once again, we flipped on that position. So I'm excited to see what your number four is and what you think about that comparison. But that's who I've got as my number three. Who you got as your number four?
Before I get to my number 4, we can't be showing our secrets in our fantasy leagues, man. I won a few fantasy leagues, got me a few green up in there. So we can't be giving away our strategies for everybody to take from us. But at number 4 for me, I do have the man Travion Henderson.
Love that. I love that. Once again, right? Great minds think alike, right? We're not just out here bullshitting, ladies and gentlemen. We got to make sure. And it's crazy that we have done no prep together, right? But we're aligning on a lot of these different things. I'm excited to get to wide receiver and a couple different other positions in our future episodes because, man, just from what we've done here, we got a lot of the same guys here. Thank you for giving me your number 4. It's only right. I'm giving you the stage. Why don't you round us off with your number 5 and then I'll give you mine.
There was a few guys at number 5 I thought about. There's Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. Cam Scatterboo was showing what he did. Devin Neal, R.J. Harvey. Turton, what he did in the combine, showing his speed from Virginia Tech. But I have to go with Travion Henderson's teammate, Quinshawn Judkins.
I love it, man, and someone that doesn't get the respect because of that running back room, right? All the different competition he had and the positions he was put in wasn't necessarily always favorable, right? But guess what? The guys out there producing, right? No matter what, you love to see a 1-2 punch in the backfield. That's something I think that a lot of teams should be looking to develop in the same vein as the Lions, and I think they play together great in those roles, but I think I'm excited to see them now branch off and be that guy in their running back room because I think both of these guys have a lot of skills that they weren't necessarily able to show because of that running back room. So that's a great shout there. Also my number 5, but man, it was this close, right? With the way I look at him and Scatterbo, right? I'm excited for Scatterbo too. I think he really is a late riser in that way, right? Wasn't necessarily hopping off the page earlier on in the season, but through that final run in the playoffs, love to see the way he picked up big time and really showed that hey, we got to look at the big boys out here, right? Not a lot of the big boys get the respect they deserve, so got to give him that shout too because it's a position that's kind of getting phased out of the NFL, but that's okay. Right, we'll make it happen at the RB position. Any other honorable mentions you want to dive into before we get out of here, Cole?
Yeah, I'd say Scatterboo was the next one on my list as well. Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, he is going to be a workhorse for some team, is going to be a steal. He had a lot of carries. He led the SEC in touchdowns last season. And then obviously talking about Turton for Virginia Tech with the speed that he showed in the combine, or Tutton, I want to pronounce it right, running a 4.32. And a lot of times you have those speedier backs. I think that he's going to be paired with somebody that's going to be the Thunder while he will be the Lightning.
I love that, man. Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to in this draft when it comes to these different positions, man. I'm excited to see how it unravels. Hey, we're locked in for at least a couple more episodes now, ladies and gentlemen. So look forward to our NFL previews. If there's anything you want to ask us, right, as far as these different prospects, we're going to be working up towards some mock drafts as well later on, and as we continue this 5-week process to the NFL draft. So make sure you keep it locked at OTS Media Co. on all social media platforms, OTS Media on YouTube, so you never miss one of the dope episodes we have cooking up for you. But just like that, Cole, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today and giving us your picks for QBs and RBs and obviously top 5 all around. We're going to follow up this one with the next up wide receivers, tight ends, and edge. So we got some real exciting positions coming up in our second edition. But on the way out, why don't you remind the people where they could find you and let them know what you're working on, what you got cooking up, if you can share.
Well, letting you know on Instagram, it is the_real_J Cole, along with Twitter. Uh, That's me. That's my handles. Keep it short and simple as always. And what we might see in the future going home, since we want to connect this pro to the college level, especially with the amount of college that I watch all the time, that we kind of want to get this bridge going and let you guys get this insight going from combine to draft. And that I had a fun little podcast that me and my buddy did a little bit where we kind of like talked about some things. It was scattered, it was all over the place. I was like writing stuff down. He was Johnny on the spot coming up with stuff, fun little facts, fun trivia, and I got some trivia questions for you for our future episodes. You want one right now?
Let's do it. Give me one right now. I love it.
All right, let's see here. Where do I have it? Let me just make sure I didn't lose it. There it is. All right. So this year's draft, currently all 32 teams hold a first round draft pick. Name the last current draft where this happened.
Wow, that's a great shout. Oh, that's a great shout. I'm trying to think. I feel like this has to be before COVID. 100%, because with all the movement just between Carolina and the Bears, we could argue that this didn't happen. So this is for first round only, right?
First round only.
I'm gonna say give me 2014. How about that?
I'm going to let you know right now, since the 32 team expansion in 2002, we have never had all 32 teams have one first round draft pick.
Wow,
Like
look at that,
whether
man.
it's
We're
during
making
the
history.
draft and we get a trade, which, props on if you've got any sort of sports bets, I'm most likely you want to talk about there's going to be a trade somewhere because I guess us as human nature, we can't help it but want to trade. I don't want to spoil the answer for you because technically I don't know the answer. That's how far back I have been going to find this answer.
Ooh, I love that. Yep. So we're gonna hold that for the next show. Once again, Cole, I appreciate everything you're bringing to the OTS family. You got a lot of knowledge that I'm gonna continue to dive deep into for the next couple of episodes. No pause. So make sure you're locked in on the show. Thank you so much again for tuning in for us and hearing what we got to say. I've really been appreciating the love from you guys. So thank you so much for that. And with that being said, we're going to catch you all next time on our second edition of the NFL 2025 Draft Deep Dive. We'll catch you then. Peace.